Hi, Rama. It's week 32, day 4 of our Bible narrative reading plan. Today we are in Jeremiah chapter 1. Now let's remember where we are in the narrative. We're looking at the big narrative of God's story from Genesis to Revelation. Right now we've been for many weeks, many months going through the history of Israel, starting with the calling of King Saul all the way to where we're at now, the divided kingdom. The northern kingdom of Israel has been conquered, and the focus of our story is on the southern kingdom of Judah. Now, we've looked at the last few days at the reign of King Josiah, one of the good kings of Judah, but he has died. Now his son Jehoiakim is on the throne. We saw yesterday that Jehoiakim is a bad king who does not do right in the sight of the Lord. And we have to keep in mind that as we're looking at the narrative, trying to put these different books of the Bible, get them, put the pieces of the puzzle together in our mind, we remember that the books of history of Samuel and Kings and Chronicles, they're telling the history from the beginning of the kingdom, the era of the kings in Israel's history, until its downfall in 586 when Judah is taken captive. We see that coming. Really the history leading us up to the New Testament. And so we have to remember that these prophets, the books of prophecy in the Old Testament, take place in real history. And so even as Josiah was on the throne, we see that Jeremiah was a prophet during that time. His ministry began during that time. Jeremiah has a long ministry. But we see the first 3 verses give us background on the time period of Jeremiah. He is the son of Hilkiah. We saw that name in our accounts of Josiah. So Jeremiah's father also served as a priest. Now Jeremiah is receiving the word of the Lord. The text is very clear that he is speaking not on his own behalf, but on God's behalf. And we have here in verses 4 and following a bit of an introduction or prologue to the life and ministry of Jeremiah. He talks about how God spoke to him saying, I knew you even before I created you. I had already set you apart. I'd consecrated you as a prophet, not just to Judah, but to the nations. And Jeremiah says, Lord, I'm young. How can I do this task that you've given me? We don't know how young he is, but we know that he's young enough that he is very nervous about this responsibility that God has given him. And yet God says, no, I will put my words in your mouth. Don't worry about this idea of being a youth. It reminds us of what Paul tells Timothy in the New Testament. Don't let anyone look down upon you because of your youth. You're to do the responsibility that God has given you. And verse 9 makes clear the Lord is working in Jeremiah's life. The Lord put out his hand and touched his mouth. The Lord said to him, Jeremiah, behold, I've put my words in your mouth. See, I've set you this day over nations and over kingdoms. Remember, he's a prophet not just to Judah, but also to the nations, to pluck up and to break down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. So Jeremiah is going to have a message of the coming destruction. He's got a message of judgment, but he's also got a message of hope that God is still on his throne and he is faithful to his people, the faithful remnant of Judah. And so we see how God validates his ministry there. He's given this almond branch vision, and it's because the almond tree was considered to be watching for spring because it budded before other plants did. And so even as the almond tree is watching for spring, God is saying he's watching over his word that he's giving to Jeremiah. And then he gives him a second word of the Lord. Verse 13 tells us, what do you see? Jeremiah says, I see a boiling pot facing from the north. And this is signifying that judgment will come out of the north, as it certainly will, as we see in our coming readings throughout this Bible reading plan. And so we're introduced to Jeremiah, a key prophet. We see the time frame of which he is prophesying. He's received the word of the Lord beginning during the time of Josiah. Now his wicked son Jehoiakim is on the throne, and Jeremiah is one of the several prophets that God is using during this time period. Here's a summary of today's reading. For more information, go to tunemyheart.org.